So, Rob, do you have any plans to watch the NFL playoffs this weekend?
I will probably keep up. I'll check out the highlights. I'll see what's going on. Usually, I'm a Super Bowl only guy, football fan. Sometimes I'll do the conference finals. Probably won't be looking at too much beyond that, though. Are you hyped?
Sure. I can't remember if I asked you or not in the few years we've been doing this, and the few Super Bowls that we've been doing this that have happened throughout the show. But are the commercials as opulent in Canada's broadcast of the game as they are here? Because it's a big commercial day for us.
I think it depends on the broadcast. If you're watching the US feed, it's a lot of the same commercials. I don't know, because I don't usually watch it I don't have like cable TV. Like I don't have that, so I usually see the commercials, but I don't know what's on the official broadcast and what's not.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a big commercial day.
Yeah, we in Canada we do know the whole thing about the Super Bowl commercials. We know about that. That's it's common knowledge. Yeah. It was actually incredible last year at the Super Bowl, all the crypto commercials. It was like 90% crypto commercials and like gambling. And it's just like, that's a sign of a healthy society. All those FTX commercials now, which are just like, they actually deleted them off their YouTube page. Like you can't find them anymore. The Larry David one and the Tom Brady one. It's really like, I think it's going to go down in history. Like it's going to age a little bit poorly, I would say. Those like the nonstop crypto commercials in the Super Bowl, similar to like the .com era stuff.
Yeah. It was a lot of crypto, some gambling, and then a lot of EVs.
Yeah.
Which I thought was like a promising sign that we're at the point where electric vehicle ads for like every car company were a big factor in Super Bowl ads. That's good, I guess. I think already it seems like gambling is going to be like the dominant industry in the Super Bowl ads. There's a big promo I just saw that Gronk is going to kick a field goal live, and if he hits, like everyone gets a share of, everyone who bets on the game on this app gets a share of 10 million. And it's just like, look, I admit I gamble. I gamble on sports a lot, so it's like I can't act like I'm above it, but it's like it is a little weird. We've talked about it before on the show. It is a little weird that it's so pervasive in our culture and in advertising,
and how quickly it's taken over everything. Right? Like it went from nothing to all of a sudden just being like the dominant message you're getting when you tune into these programs. And that's the thing, like we talked a couple of weeks ago, how it's totally possible to engage in that kind of thing responsibly, just as like a fun thing. But like famously, that's not always the easiest thing for every single person. And it is a little weird to see how quickly it's just come to completely dominate. And, it's, again, I don't know that any of these things are signs of like a healthy economy or a healthy society. The fact that these are the main, like the things that are being talked about and advertised on these big cultural touchstone moments like the Super Bowl. I don't know. It's a little odd.
It is. I don't know. I just wonder what it's going to be. I wonder what the big, like, there's always like a stomach churning ad.
Yeah.
Like last year, the one that really, beyond just the FTX, like Larry David stuff, there was also one for some crypto firm or trading platform or something where they just put a QR code on the screen and it was like, scan this. Like, and I think it gave everyone like $5 worth of some probably coin that's worth less than $5 now. I can't remember what the deal was, but it just like, that also really rubbed me the wrong way. Just like people have no idea what they're scanning and what it's going to where it's going to take their phone. It's just so weird.
Yeah, it's probably fine. Don't think too much about it.
We need the Super Bowl ad. I think that's what's going to take our show to the next
That would be
level.
wonderful. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Who do we talk to
All we
about
need,
that? How expensive can that be?
I think it's just $5 million for like 20 seconds or 30 seconds. We just need a couple more subscribers over on Substack at theinsurgents.substack.com to get our Super Bowl ad.
We're like 86% of the way there already, so it's really just a matter of putting us over over the top. That would be nice.
Yeah, right. But people should subscribe. Super Bowl ad aside, it'd be good. We had a good premium episode this week with our special guests Rob Rousseau and Jordan Uhl. It was a great conversation with them.
We're flying solo again here too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool though. I like that.
Talked about the attack on the Brazilian, or the, if you want to call it an attack, if you want to call it an insurrection, whatever you want to call it, that happened in Brazil. We discussed that. We discussed Bolsonaro. We had a good conversation overall. We also talked about Hakeem Jeffries' speech, his kind of like alphabetical slaughter speech,
which we obviously loved.
And
as you know, anyone listening,
we wrote.
Anyone listening to the show knows how much that we love that kind of shit. So
yeah, it was just so up our alley. That was a fun conversation.
That was a good one. And here we are again. Do you want to, because this is the regular, the free episode. Usually it's like around this time we kick to a guest. Since we're not though, can I just play the music anyways though?
Go for it.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. Well, yeah, make sure everyone subscribes to the podcast at theinsurgents.substack.com to get access to our previous bonus episodes, like the one Jordan was describing, and a number of other wonderful guests we've had throughout the months and years. And that'll do it for now. So Jordan and I will be resuming this conversation right after this. Have you seen any good movies lately?
Good.
Any good movies you got watching?
Oh yeah, dude. I don't know if we talked about it on the last episode, but The Menu.
Oh yeah, I've heard a couple people mention that.
Did we talk? I can't remember if we talked about it or not. Have you watched it yet?
I guess I should. I've seen a number of people recommend it.
Oh, I don't understand the hate for it. I don't get it. It just the movie like snob people. I don't get. It's, this movie's terrible. No, it's not. If this movie isn't up to your like extremely high standard, that's a you problem. Yeah. The movie's fun, and within it is a critique of people and criticism of people who aren't in that line of work, acting like they're experts. And it's just like, I really feel like there was a lot of people. I've seen a lot of reactions to the movie from people that it kind of thumbs its nose at.
Yeah.
Also then turning around and be like, this movie sucked. And it's like, well, this movie is making fun of people like you. So maybe that's why.
I see. Yeah.
I loved it. It was fun. It's a very fun
check
movie.
That out. It's even similar to James Cameron's epic masterpiece, Avatar, The Way of Water.
No.
And all these kind of snobs, these film snobs coming on podcasts and streams talking about this film and saying that they don't want to watch it. And, I think that's bullshit as well. I'm agreeing with what you were just saying. And that drives me just up the wall.
For that, it's just
these losers who just have nothing better to do than complain all day about James Cameron's films. Okay.
It's the time thing for me.
We don't need to go down this road again.
No. You know what I am excited for, though?
What?
Tomorrow night, we're recording this on Saturday. Tomorrow night on HBO, The Last of Us starts. Yeah. I can't wait for that.
I'm very hyped for that as well. I was a huge fan of the games. We've talked about them a couple times.
Definitely.
Yeah, and it really seems like they've nailed the sort of tone and of the games, and the casting has been tremendous. Pedro Pascal looks great as Joel. I actually really do love Troy Baker's performance as Joel, like in the actual games, and it was one thing that I wasn't sure that I was ever going to be able to like see any other actor playing Joel, but they really absolutely crushed that casting, and it really looks great. I love the games, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that one.
Yeah, I'm so excited, and I hear like the team at Naughty Dog has been pretty heavily involved in the TV adaptation, so that's one area where games to TV shows or games to movies always has a disconnect. It's just always like, here's a team of TV writers and producers who kind of maybe sort of are in communication with the game developers in the studio, and the finished product is always lackluster.
Yeah.
One of the most embarrassing things, I couldn't even bring myself to finish the first episode, was the Halo show.
Oh, I never tried to watch that.
Did you watch that at all?
No.
Oh, fucking awful. It's like, look, I don't want a team of TV writers to invent a new story. The story works, and that's what we've been playing for 20 plus years. It's like literally just give us fan service. I don't care.
Yeah. Well, it's just they want to take the property, they want to take the IP and just do whatever something else with it. But it inevitably ends up being disappointing for the people that are most hardcore about the IP that they're trying to, turn into something else.
But it didn't even seem to resonate with people who didn't care about the game.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a tough sell because look, Halo was never really known for like a beautiful storyline like Last of Us is. Last of Us would probably do well outside of the game fans.
Yeah.
Because it does have an interesting story. Halo was just like a shooter and the threat is like, existential invasive species, among other things. But then also within that, it's like, part of it is like Master Chief's voice is iconic and you have someone new, you have him take off his mask and also you like keep showing his ass. Like it's weird.
Was there a lot of bunch of Master Chief butt shots in that? I didn't know that.
Master Chief's all caked up, dude.
Oh, wow. I did not. I was not. Maybe I do need to check out this show. It actually.
I like that part. I'm gonna. I paused it
just because I really didn't like it, and I was just like wanted to really make sure that I understood what I didn't like about it. Yeah, I do think in the press for Last of Us they have leaned a little bit too hard into be like, this is not one of those normal games. This is like art, and it's like, and talking about how it's like the greatest story ever in the history of video games, and I love it, but I also think they've come across as like maybe a little bit pretentious in talking about it in a way that I think has been maybe a little off-putting. And Craig Mazin, the guy that he did Chernobyl and he's done a number of other Hollywood things, I find him kind of obnoxious as well. But it does seem like from what I've seen of it that they really did a really faithful adaptation of it that I think will resonate with the wide audience. Like you said, it's not just like it's not just that it has an interesting story, but it's a story that we've seen probably a number of times. But it does create characters that you become like emotionally kind of attached to. And when you see the things that they go through, it's very affecting, like even in a way in a game that I think I've not really ever experienced, where you actually feel the violence also is so visceral and you have this kind of emotional bond with the characters that it really raises the stakes of any given situation, really make you feel things in a way that other video games don't really get to that level.
Oh, for sure. Like if the show gets, continued beyond the first season, when they get into the second game, that's where the storyline is like actually really impressive. And I would say the second one's story is more closer to art than the first one. The first one's just like, here's a zombie game with a couple cool elements.
Yeah.
The second one is like, oh shit, this is like a really good introspection or a really good analysis and evaluation of like grief and cyclical violence.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah. And like we've, and especially in terms of the first one, like we've seen that story of like the grizzled older guy kind of connecting with a sort of surrogate child and kind of overcoming their differences and forming this emotional bond in this crazy apocalyptic situation. There's a number of stories like that, Children of Men, is like that. Logan has that element. Like it's a pretty common trope, but it really just does it so well. And the characterization is so good that you forget that you've seen it before a number of other times. I'll tell you another movie that I saw this week on the level we're talking about artistic masterpieces. I did revisit Steven Seagal's 1990 action thriller Marked for Death this week as well.
Yeah.
Are you a Seagal guy?
How was that? No, I'm not at all.
It's good. I was a big Seagal fan, like in the 90s, like at his heyday. I wanted to watch Hard to Kill, which is like the classic Seagal movie, which I genuinely unironically enjoy. That wasn't on streaming. This was the only one that was on streaming, where he plays this like retired DEA agent who then like goes back home after this botched operation and sees that these like Jamaican voodoo drug gangs have moved into this small town neighborhood, and he's got to, he gets involved with that, and then he gets the titular Marked for Death after in clashing with this gang. And then you just got to go at the end of the movie, kill the hell out of a whole bunch of people, which is
interesting.
It was satisfying. Yeah, it was satisfying. Not my favorite Seagal. The voodoo drug gang thing was a little bit off-putting. There was a weird moment in American pop culture in the 90s where voodoo Jamaican drug lords were like the boogeyman for like a really brief time. When Predator 2 famously also had the voodoo Jamaican drug gang plot as well.
Oh yeah, they were like drug lords of LA, right?
Yeah, exactly. It hasn't aged. That part hasn't aged super well. It's also funny because like when you get into like learning about American foreign policy and socialism and anti-imperialism, that kind of stuff. And then you see these movies take place and you see the sinister propaganda at play. Like you see Seagal at the beginning of the movie, he's like in Colombia working for the DEA. And it's like, while he's there in Colombia, there's probably the CIA is the one pumping in the funds and the drugs in the first place to arm all these cartels that he's fighting, and then he's going into his community where these like Jamaican and Caribbean communities are forming because of, centuries of colonialism there. And he's just like, I have to go kill everybody now. I'm going to be gouging eyes and breaking arms and really going crazy on these people, but it's still, it's also enjoyable to watch. I
can't say I'm going to put it on my list, but I'm happy for you.
I would definitely recommend Hard to Kill.
The only thing that I've seen from Seagal. No,
that's a classic.
It's not a good sell. The Seagal clips that I really like are where he's like in Eastern Europe or Russia doing like stunt demonstrations and everyone's just kind of like going along with it. That's how I feel watching, and this isn't a movie thing, but like Ovechkin, like this season.
Yeah, just like barely even trying.
I feel like there's a lot of parallels between Ovechkin and like Seagal now. It's like kind of sad to watch him. Like the guy is so old. He seems exhausted. Like he just kind of like lurks near the line and they just keep feeding him the puck and it just like doesn't get back on defense. It's just like he seems dead. And just like, I was watching him the other night and it was just kind of like, this is sad. Just like the guy needs to retire.
Yeah. Well, it was cool how he passed Gordie Howe in the all-time scorers list for number 2. And you're getting that amazing discourse around Ovechkin as well, where it's like he's doing all this historic stuff and breaking these records, but unfortunately he's not clearly denouncing Putin, and we can't possibly say anything good about this guy or praise him because he's an evil Russian and stuff like that. And I've talked about it before, but the way that like we hold foreign athletes to this level that we would never ask American athletes to, or treat them the same way, whether it's Russian athletes or whether it's Chinese athletes, saw that a lot in the Olympics. Like no one was ever, when the Iraq war was at its height, or, the news of Abu Ghraib is breaking, or Fallujah, or any of the horrific things that America did during the war on terror. No one was saying like in the hushed tones whenever like LeBron James or Kobe Bryant or some like big sports star does anything. But unfortunately, we can't possibly say anything good about LeBron or Dwayne Wade or whoever, Tom Brady. We can't talk about Tom Brady. Why isn't Tom Brady denouncing the war on terror? Why isn't he denouncing the president of the country that he lives in? It's like, it's amazing that we hold foreign athletes to this like standard that we would never ever do with American athletes. And in fact, when American athletes do talk about politics, we're like, shut up. Yeah. Get back on the court, get back on the field. Stop talking about politics.
It's just right. It's insane that they have, on the one hand, you're not allowed to talk about police brutality. You're not allowed to talk about racism. You're not allowed to talk about injustice. You have to have these kind of like, the only advocacy you can do is like a breast cancer awareness month and like support the troops. But then we expect people from Russia who also these same people insist that this guy is this like murderous dictator who's hell-bent on taking over the world, that these single people need to use their huge platforms to single this guy out. And we've seen like Panarin on the Rangers did last year. The year before, he did, and then he like had to take a leave of absence from the NHL. He was getting a bunch of threats. His family were getting a bunch of threats in Russia. It's like nobody needs to be in that situation because you want more entertainment from your fucking couch. One player who did do that and has now since turned like massive heel is Enes Kanter, turned Enes Freedom, who was critical of Erdogan. And now, did you see this week he's got like a bounty on his head?
Yeah, I saw it in Turkey. Yeah, they put a bounty on his head. I did see that. Yeah.
Like separately from his comments on Erdogan and the Turkish government, separately, he has turned into a like right wing, like just culture war guy.
Oh yeah.
And like he's also blaming that on his career tanking.
Yeah. Because his whole trajectory this season seemed like he wanted to pull a reverse Kaepernick. It's like he knew that he couldn't really like play on an NBA team anymore. So it's like, I'm going to become Mr. like outspoken human rights defender and go after every single one of America's enemies and talk about the human rights issues, and then claim that when I don't make an NBA roster because I can't fucking play defense, that I'm some victim of some conspiracy because the NBA wants to cater to China or to Turkey or whatever else.
Yeah, it's like the Uyghurs thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It was like the perfect excuse for a terrible stat line.
Yeah, well, and it was funny too because eventually, he claimed to be sort of doing this on his own, and just be this trajectory just coming from his own self. And he's like, "No, I'm back. I'm at the FBI office, hanging out with the FBI." And it's like, we know, Ennis. Yeah, we know you are. Thanks for really spelling that out for us, though.
So funny.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, speaking of culture war issues, there was a big fight this week, Rob. I don't know if it made its way to Canada. I don't know if you guys are next, but right now we're under attack. Our rights and our freedoms here in the United States are under attack. Our precious gas stoves are going to be seized. They're going to come and round up all the stoves.
Biden's going to send the ATF.
Something is definitely going to happen.
Just take everyone's stove. No, I know it's really scary stuff when you see these kind of authoritarian trends beginning. And I know you told me that you just turned on the gas on your gas stove and you're just leaving it on in the apartment
I didn't start the flame. I'm just letting the gas run in protest.
That's your right. That's your right as an American. No one can take that away from you, So good for you. I'm happy to hear that.
I wonder what would happen because what triggered this was a study that found that gas stoves lead to worse air quality in the home and can increase the risk of childhood asthma. That's what triggered this. It wasn't like Biden saying, we're going to take gas stoves away from you.
No, it never is. It's always just like, this might be kind of dangerous.
Yes. It was just an independent study. And then, the right went with, well, come and take it. Like the same type of shit they do for everything.
Sure.
And it was just like, they've got this cycle. It's like, hey, we're going to make memes. We're going to talk about how we use our gas stoves every day and we love it and it's essential and no one will ever take it away from you. And it's actually the most American thing you can do is cook on a gas stove and all this. And I wonder what would happen if we didn't find out about the harms and effects of lead in paint.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder what would happen if we discovered that today.
Oh, absolutely.
The reaction from the right, if we discovered today lead paint was bad.
They would all be eating paint chips on Instagram Live or whatever. Anything, like literally any health matter, asbestos, where it's already happening with smoking. They're trying to go revisit the smoking indoors debate as well. Anything that remotely is like it has about public health or anything like that. Seatbelts, even though there were anti-seatbelt activists when it was going on, today it would be even worse. If seatbelts were invented today, you would see all these guys, I'm driving at 100 miles an hour on the freeway with no seatbelt all the time just to...
There's nothing you can do but cry. There's nothing you can do but cry about it, liberal. As they fly through the windshield.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's really amazing. Like, you could really... I don't think there's really a limit to anything of what you can convince these people to do. Just by being like, hey, maybe we should cut down on this activity because it's harmful to the environment or yourself. Second question also is like, all these people that were complaining about this, what are they cooking on their fucking precious gas stoves? Like, what is so important? Like, I understand if you're like a chef or if you really need that, like in the high heat from the gas stove or the whatever nuance in your cooking that you can use the gas stove with. What are these people actually making in their gas stoves that's so important that they feel so strongly about clinging to this? Like, really, or do you even cook anything? Like, is it just a matter of like being told no and having a childish outburst about it? Like, that's what I'm really wondering with some of these guys. Like, are they big cooks? Are they cooking up big meals in their gas stoves? I don't even think they are. It's really just a matter of not being able to handle the basic idea that this activity might be harmful.
Right. That right-wing account that seems to have curried favor with Elon Musk and was also like a favorite of Trump's Cat Turd 2,
yeah,
which is such a weird name, but it is a big right-wing Twitter account. They obviously jump on every culture war thing.
Sure, yeah.
And they were like, they tweeted something like, "Oh, I've been running my gas stove all day and there's nothing you can do but cry about it, liberals." Someone looked up, apparently this guy started an LLC, Cat Turd LLC. Someone looked up the address and it's his home and then looked up that home on Zillow. The guy does not have a gas stove. He has an electric stove.
Well, it's like, I mean, there's no better example of this like relentless victimization complex that conservatives have, not just about this, but that account. The world's wealthiest man spent $44 billion, like destroyed his own personal financial situation in order to buy this website to impress people like Cat Turd 2. He's there, literally Elon Musk. He's there at 4 a.m. acting as Cat Turd 2's like personal shadow banning investigator and customer service representative, like at all times. And it's still not enough. It's amazing. This guy's like, I'm still being shadow banned. I'm still being silenced and censored. This fucking obnoxious right-wing account with like over 1 million followers, with the Elon Musk, the guy who owns Twitter, literally acting as his personal, correspondent day in, day out. And it's still not enough for them. It's amazing how the people like this, like, are just not incapable of doing anything other than just like finding obscure random things to feel persecuted about and just complaining about it all day. And then they wonder why no one wants to engage with their precious tweets. All they do is complain like an asshole all day. And your name is Cat Turd. Like, maybe you need to look inward in that situation. I don't know.
One of the other right-wing freakouts that was funny this week, in addition to the smoking thing, actually on the smoking thing, did you see the clip of Tucker Carlson?
The most American of all pleasures.
About like the guy, like the guy. There's a guy in the house who is smoking cigars indoors now, and there's like, oh, nothing you can do about it. And Tucker opens this segment with like, why do people think tobacco is so bad? What do you mean? Why do people think tobacco is so bad? It's like one of the biggest killers. And look, the thing is,
there's been significant research on this. Yeah,
it's like it shows like this type of stuff is so disingenuous so often. Like Tucker used to smoke, and then he switched to Nicorette, and like he made a big deal when he finally even kicked Nicorette a couple years ago because it was bad and he didn't want to be addicted to the nicotine. And it's like cigars are a different beast than cigarettes, but like acting like you don't understand why tobacco is bad or suggesting that it's not bad at all is fucking wild. Like every once in a while I like a cigar. It's like like when we were in San Diego for TwitchCon, a few of us, there was a cigar bar kind of by the convention center. We went there one night and we just had a cigar. It was fun. It was like a weird, fun thing to do. And I acknowledge when doing that, oh, this is terrible for me. Yeah. But if I'm doing that multiple times a day, every day, like that is way, way worse. It's infinitely worse. And for him to suggest, why is this bad? Is this actually bad? It just really shows how disingenuous his whole game is.
Yeah. And you know what? It speaks to, we talked about the conservative victimization complex, but I think it gets at something else, which is their completely perverse and skewed version of like what personal freedom is. Whereas like personal freedom for me is I should be able to chain cigars inside. I should be able to own 50 different guns and, assault weapons and stuff. I should be able to spew toxic chemicals into the atmosphere because that's my personal freedom, and that nothing supersedes this idea that I need to be able to do whatever I want at any time. But the way that these activities harm other people doesn't factor into this equation whatsoever. And not only harm other people, but like take away their freedom, their personal freedom. I would like to have the freedom when I'm in an office to not inhale tobacco smoke or to not have the planet poisoned and the climate changed by spewing toxic chemicals into the ground, or like the constant gun violence on the streets, in schools, accidentally suicides, like people that are their personal freedom is severely impacted by this weird notion of we must be able to own these weapons at all. And that's the most important political issue that we have. It's like, it's very strange, this obsession that these conservative types have with personal freedom, and they can simultaneously believe in that like more fervently than anything, while, not believing that others also have personal freedom. Other people have freedom to not want to walk down the street and not knowing who's carrying a deadly weapon, who is not, or who don't want to inhale secondhand smoke and get lung cancer or throat cancer from it. Like this just doesn't factor into their precious values about freedom. It's an extremely selfish, self-centered ideology.
Yeah. And that same sort of rationale never applies to other people's right, or very seldom applies to other people's right to get married. There's a few people out there who truly are like this, like the purest distillation of libertarianism, where it's like, I really don't care. You should be able to do what you want, but I want to do what I want. Like those people, I don't really have a problem with those types of people. I think their views on economic aid and the government's role in like supporting people is wrong, inherently wrong. But like if they're like, hey, I want to smoke cigars. If I want to do whatever I want to do on my own land, like, but you can also do what you want. I kind of don't have a problem with that, especially when they're also cool with, pro-choice laws, because you always see people break in the libertarian camps where it's like, I just don't think the government should be involved in everyone's lives at all whatsoever. And then it's like, by the way, I'm anti-choice.
Yeah.
It's like, that sucks. That fucking sucks. But if they really don't care, and like what you're saying, they also consider the effects of what they have on other people. Like, I don't care. Do what you want. I don't need to be in your life. You don't need to be in mine.
Well, that's what I mean. It's like the people like Tucker Carlson and people that have this kind of perverse idea of what personal freedom represents when it comes to guns, when it comes to smoking, when it comes to like automobile related stuff or pollution. That's when they only care about their personal experience and not how that affects other people. But when it comes to gay people being married, it's like, wait, how does this affects me though? You can't be married. How does this affect me? Then all of a sudden they care about these kind of consequences. When it comes to trans people existing, this affects me though somehow. Me, the protagonist of reality. You, this trans person just existing, or this, teen or young person getting any kind of gender affirming care from a doctor, from a teacher, whatever. That affects me somehow. I'm being victimized by this. And then completely not acknowledging the way their own behavior victimizes others. It's infuriating how completely inconsistent it is. And it feels like it's almost trite to point out these kind of inconsistencies. It's almost boring at this point to even talk about it, but it's just infuriating the way that they really do not apply any of these beliefs evenly.
Right. Yeah, it's like you're saying, it feels kind of trite to even point it out, but it's just every time we have one of these cycles, it's always the same thing. It's like they're complaining about trans people or drag queen story hours. It's like, you don't like it, don't go.
Yeah. Or don't get an abortion.
Who fucking cares? Yes. Don't get gay married.
Yeah.
Like what?
It's really bullshit. Easy to not do.
Yeah. Live your life. Let other people live theirs. The other culture war thing that I thought was just really ridiculous, but it also speaks to a broader problem with the corporate world, was the M&Ms bag.
Yeah, that I agree with. I was upset about this.
I thought it was bullshit for different reasons. So M&Ms did this bag where it's like, oh, here's all the girl M&Ms, and the right wing was like, oh, they're doing wokeism. M&Ms have gone woke again.
This is what they took from you.
And yeah, like the same old like song and dance. And then that guy who I think is like, I'm at this point, I think he's doing a bit, that Nick Adams in USA, Australian guy turned like Trump loyalist.
He cannot be real.
He doesn't seem real. And every new thing, he's like, same thing with Cat, like front and center of the culture war for clout. And he filmed a video. He like bought a bag of M&Ms, went to the M&M store in Times Square or in New York, and was like, we're boycotting M&Ms. I take the alpha male challenge. Go get a bag of M&Ms and step on them. It's like, so you're encouraging people to go buy M&Ms. It's like, it has to be a bit. It's so bizarre. And he like has one. He like daintily steps on at the end of the video. And same thing. Tucker loves the culture war stuff. Was whining about it.
He's done multiple segments on M&Ms. Tucker Carlson, like this is like a main.
They're not fuckable anymore. I want to fuck that green M&M.
I miss the hot M&Ms. It's ridiculous.
But he's like, M&Ms have gone woke again. He's doing this segment. My issue with it is that like this is just like hollow corporate feminism that doesn't do anything to better anyone's lives, doesn't better any woman's life. It's just totally bullshit. They want to talk about women and diversity and equity in the workplace. Like their C-suite, I looked up Mars Incorporated, their parent company. Their C-suite is like 70 or 80% men. Hey man, start there. Yeah. Shake things up internally. What are you doing? What's keeping you from doing it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it speaks to how in our culture it's so divorced from like the idea of actually changing thing on any fundamental level is so like alien to people that's all they have to talk about. It's like what side of the culture war you're on, which trite meaningless gesture from some mega corporation. Do you support the gesture or are you against the gesture? Are you going to boycott because of whatever woke decision this massive corporation that has made? You see this a lot with Disney and Disney films, like trying to incorporate more people of color or sexual minorities or non-binary people, and then people convincing themselves that somehow this massive corporation is somehow this like left-wing entity. And that's their sort of analysis of what is happening politically. And then by default, it's like then people that are progressive end up just being like, well, now I have to support this big corporation. And that's the thing to do. And, nothing about any of these underlying systems is changing. It's all these complete meaningless, hollow gestures. And then it's just, people are arguing over it and engaging in this kind of blood sport over it. And these extremely evil institutions and corporations are just allowed to continue their terrible behavior while they're laughing all the way to the bank.
Yeah, Mars was part of that class action suit about the use of child and slave labor.
Yeah,
in their cocoa production. Like they've led to a ton of deforestation.
Yeah, maybe they should take a look at that rather than like than the M&M marketing.
Right. Yeah, all this stuff is just it just makes me so kind of jaded on a lot of that stuff. But also, it really just is another reminder that nothing is going to be changed or achieved through consumption.
No.
Like we're not going to get any sort of equality or betterment of this country or system or whatever through consumption.
Yeah.
You're not going to change the world by watching a movie multiple times, unless it's Avatar 2, The Way of Water. But like you going to see and paying to see a Disney movie is not going to change anything. You buying an M&Ms bag because it has the girl M&Ms on it is not going to change anything. What changes things is when you hold those institutions to account to pay their fair share, and that money is invested in social programs and in communities that help those people flourish, help marginalized groups, help women, help trans people flourish and thrive in this society. If that's if that's what you care about, you going to see a movie or you buying a product because it has a nice aesthetic isn't going to change anything, because those companies aren't doing anything materially to improve those people's lives.
Yeah. It's an issue. It's part of living in this like modern futuristic capitalist kind of world, is that everything becomes commodified, even our own dissent, even these kind of political issues, where it's like, it's so divorced from from political action that the only way that you can support like social justice is by buying the woke products versus the reactionary, the anti-woke products. It's as long as like, that's all that really matters. As long as we're still going out and buying stuff, the line's still going out.
Right. The stove thing, to get back to that, this got picked up in Congress, and it was like a really good illustration of what this next Congress is going to look like, especially in the House. I mean, this was their first opportunity to show what their priorities were. They've whined for 2 years that, inflation wasn't being addressed, energy wasn't being addressed, all these things that they purportedly cared about, that they wanted to tackle. All of these things went by the wayside. So they finally take power, they get their speaker race sorted out, and now they're finally in charge of the House. And the first thing that they do is talk about gas stoves. And someone introduces this act, the Stove Act. I can't remember what the acronym stood for, but it was basically like no government seizure of gas stoves, which, like we mentioned, is not fucking happening. It has never been on the table. It will not be on the table. It's totally bullshit. But it's just, they just want to push culture war fights, which is funny. Like, I kind of am at the point where it's like, let them do it. Just fucking do it.
Yeah.
Because it clearly isn't working in elections for you. So go for it.
Yeah. Maybe the big gas stove debate of 2023 is going to propel them to victory in the next round of elections. And I wanted to talk about something else that has been going on since Republicans have now taken back over the House. And, it's been an ongoing kind of very frustrating narrative that you see from these kind of like post-left sort of communities that have come up, where they've become so inherently sort of reactionary toward the Democratic Party and liberals, which a lot of which I understand. Like, I understand where a lot of that criticism comes from, and I agree with a lot of it as well. But they've twisted themselves into this pretzel, especially when it comes to like foreign policy stuff, to kind of try and pretend that Republicans are the real anti-war party, or Republicans are the movement that is going to, investigate or rein in the intelligence community, the CIA or the FBI or any of that stuff. We've seen talk about them starting some kind of like church committee, which I just think is preposterous. This idea that they're ever going to actually meaningfully try to claw back power from these entrenched sort of intelligence establishment. And they're not just going to be investigating bullshit like conservatives being silenced on social media or just purging these institutions of whatever moderately liberal types are in there and just filling them even more with like reactionary allies. You know, this idea that even if Republicans or conservatives or libertarians might sometimes make arguments that you might happen to agree with, whether it comes to funding Ukraine or shipping arms to Ukraine or criticizing these intelligence apparatuses, it doesn't mean that any of that criticism is coming from like a legitimate or moral place, or that given the power, they're going to be any better. You see this as well this week where they're now starting a committee, conservatives in the House, to investigate China. And you see there's this desire to kind of pivot away from Russia and just go towards China instead. And they want to split Russia off from China, whereas the sort of liberal establishment wants to just kind of keep going after both. So I just think this idea is preposterous that conservatives in the U.S. government are really going to do anything meaningful to have a sort of better or more coherent foreign policy or a better positioning when it comes to these intelligence agencies. And they're not just going to completely cynically, wield this power for their own ends. It's completely preposterous, but I've seen a lot of people that are just so reactionary against the Democratic Party that they've kind of believed this, convinced themselves of this, that they're going to be some kind of allies in this sort of anti-imperialist goals.
Yeah, I think there's space for that conversation, but it has been created by the Democrats. And that's something progressives and progressive anti-war activists have been warning about, especially after the invasion of Ukraine. The U.S. and its continued and increased funding to Ukraine, as we've talked about and as some progressives have constantly warned about, only increases the risk of making that war worse. And that should be the dominant progressive position. Like, we should push for diplomacy. And when 30 or so progressive lawmakers introduced that letter, there was a bipartisan meltdown and freak out over it, and they were forced to walk it back, and they said, oh, it was released by mistake. But that should not be the case. What that does is it creates an opportunity for like these freaks on the right who purport to be anti-war, but in a much different way. They're anti-intervention, their America first foreign policy that we've seen Tucker get heralded for years comes from a place of disdain and ultimately neglect for people around the world. It's not that they don't think we should be spending this much on the military elsewhere. It's not that they don't think intervention works. It's that they don't think those people are worth any time or effort. And it's inherently a jingoistic position. That's the people who are gaining ground in the anti-war space in conversation, because Democrats and progressives who are anti-war have been like browbeaten into submission. We shouldn't be in a situation where progressives suggesting that diplomacy should be on the table are required and forced to take that letter back. Medea Benjamin, who has led Code Pink for years and is a spectacular anti-war activist, interrupted a Brookings event this week where they had like a panel on the importance of funding Ukraine and increased funding to Ukraine. And she mentioned all these points and talked about how we shouldn't be ceding ground to people like Marjorie Taylor Greene on these issues. Yeah. And she asked the audience, she's like, does anyone worry about the future of this war and a prolonged, protracted conflict that only leads to more death? And don't we want diplomacy? And she kind of asked the audience, and none of them engaged with her. And she's like, seriously, none of you? And I really worry about people there who are, being displaced, being killed, being in a situation that they didn't have anything to do with its start or the invasion itself, being forced to protect themselves, being forced to fight back against a militarized force, and also the people who are being drafted into this invasion, into the Russian military against their will. They don't want it. They don't want this. We saw protests in Russia at the onset, and those people were beat and arrested for protesting the invasion. There's so many people on both sides who don't fucking want this. That's the people we should be lifting up. Those two groups are the people we should be lifting up, not people who are clamoring for more war or who think that Ukraine will summarily defeat Russia. There's not going to be a clear winner or loser here. It's just going to be a ton of fighting, a ton of death, a ton of injury, and hundreds of thousands or millions of people displaced when it's all said and done. That's the solution. That's going to be the end game, no matter what. And we're just making it worse.
Yeah, and like I've said a number of times, like when it comes to this, like there needs to be space on the left to talk openly about other alternatives to this, to criticize the way that this conflict was provoked. You know, as we said, talked about a number of times. You can talk about the causes for the Russia and Ukraine war. It doesn't mean that you agree with the invasion or that you think it's a good thing, but we need to be open and honest about the role that America and Canada and the Western countries have played in creating the situation that led to the invasion in the first place. That's been completely taken off the table. And like I've been repeatedly warning, I think when there's no space to ever talk about any of these things on the left, then it does leave an opening for Marjorie Taylor Greene. It does leave an opening for people like Tucker Carlson. And because there's people that are going to be receptive to that message, what's with this nonstop arms transfer to this country in the Eastern Europe when I can't pay my grocery bill, when I can't pay rent, when I'm struggling. I see the government just had this endless money printing machine to fight this war, but not giving me anything. And then people like Marjorie Taylor Greene or Tucker Carlson are able to take that and very cynically kind of use it towards their own ends. And completely abandoning that has been a real disaster, I think, on the left. But yeah, like I said, it's like I don't think any of these people are credible when it comes to these things. Like especially when you talk about the run up to the war in Ukraine, that was not like led by the Democrats. That was John McCain and Lindsey Graham were heavily involved with that, heavily involved in promoting regime change in Ukraine and installing a pro-NATO, pro-Western government, which was the origins of this entire conflict. There's footage of John McCain and Lindsey Graham talking to these like Azov militants in 2017 being like, we will get you whatever you need. Take the fight to the Russians. This is not, conservatives are not credible when it comes to this issue, even though they might now that liberals and the Joe Biden administration are the ones holding the bag, they might be making these kinds of arguments because it hurts them and gives them a kind of credibility, but they don't actually have any credibility. Tucker Carlson as well, another person that might say a few things when it comes to foreign policy every now and then, or when it comes to the role of the FBI or the CIA or the things that they do around the world, might say things that make you go, that he's kind of has a point about that. But also I think is someone that wants to just pivot towards China and pivot towards ramping up tensions with China. This is a big problem. I totally recognize the way that mainstream liberals and people on the left that should have known better have really failed when it comes to this thing. But I think too many people have seen that and said like, well, my natural allies are conservatives then, when it's like, I feel like they're just getting played and they're just supporting people that have their own terrible tendencies that they're trying to instill. And, just because you don't agree with the Biden administration or the Trudeau administration for participating in this conflict doesn't mean that these people are any more credible or deserve to be in control of these kinds of security institutions, or they're going to do any better job. They're not.
Yeah. So I think we can just expect a lot more of this over the next 2 years.
Yeah.
They had their opportunity to, set a defining tone and tenor and message for what this Congress is going to look like. And it just seems to be more of the same culture war bullshit.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, you whined about inflation, and that's the issue that was on everyone's minds in the election. And there were a ton of warning signs to Republicans. Hey, they trust Democrats more on this. And you get an opportunity to do literally anything about it in your first week, and you're whining about gas stoves. Yeah. Something that isn't happening and connected to the government at all whatsoever. Good luck.
Well, that's it. I mean,
I say go for it. Just go for it.
Just talk about this for the next 2 fucking years. It really, just to put a button in all this. I mean, the whole gas stove thing. That kind of thing just discourages me so much, because guess what? I'm sorry. I know this is like makes people somewhat uncomfortable, but like we do have to kind of change our lifestyles a little bit. We have to sacrifice a little bit. I'm not obsessed with like degrowth, and I understand that it's troubling to, I think, pass on the responsibility of dealing with climate change to the people that have done the least to actually like create the situation. But we do need to kind of sacrifice. We do need, when it comes to the environment, when it comes to public health, and every single one of these incidents, like when there's even one mention of, you might lose the ability to do this, have a gas stove, just the idea of it, drive a gas guzzling SUV, in Canada, like they just announced recently that by the 2030s, all new cars are going to be EVs or zero emissions vehicles. And we know that that's not even that's only a drop in the bucket when it comes to actually like reducing emissions. It's almost like a gesture in and of itself, but you still have people losing their minds about that. Come and take away the Trudeau Gestapo is going to come take away my truck, because you have all these like Albertans that drive these massive trucks around their gated communities and never actually fucking use the truck to tow anything or put anything in the back. But it's because they have this like lifestyle, working class cosplay thing. They spend, $100,000 on these trucks to pretend like they're carpenters or whatever. But it's just so discouraging, right? Like, we do need to sacrifice collectively. We do need to have collective response to these things. And just this culture of like consumerism and individualism that's just been drilled into people's brains for generations really makes me not very confident about our ability as a society to collectively respond to any of these things, whether it's the next pandemic, whether it's the climate crisis, or any other crisis that involves collective sacrifice. It's just we cannot do it. And it's just this gas stove bullshit is the latest example of how far behind we are in having any kind of social solidarity or ability to have collective action on anything.
Well,
we love to call it off right after one of my classic, very positive and affirming diatribes.
Also, I'll be honest, I really want to get back to this playoff game. The Niners and the Seahawks that game is a lot closer than I thought it was going to be. Okay. So I'm dying to see who wins. And I got money on the game.
Big parlays with that?
I already hit one, actually.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, I had McCaffrey to score, Walker to score, McCaffrey to get like 75 yards, and Walker to get 54 yards.
Okay.
And the closest one, there's 2 minutes to go in the third quarter. Walker has 56. That was the one I was waiting on. And then I have another one, very similar, but a couple other like things factored in. And that also requires the 49ers to win. So I hit both.
Nice.
If the Niners
Very
hold on.
Nice.
Everything's already hit.
All right, man. Love it. Well, enjoy that.
Yeah. I'm excited.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to the episode, everyone. Once again, please subscribe to the podcast at theinsurgents.substack.com, or you can go to insurgentspod.com, right? That's the actual website. That's what it is, right?
That's right. And it is. And be sure to check us out on YouTube.
Yeah.
We post the link in the description. We've got a ton of great videos on there, and some of the comments are really great. Go in, join that comment section. It's very robust.
Yeah. Please help us continue to pivot to video.
Which you all made possible with your subscriptions.
That's right.
We were able to upgrade our recording platform because of your subscription.
That's right.
So thank you for everyone who has subscribed.
Thank you, everyone. We love you. We'll talk to you next time. Rob and Jordan out. Thank you for listening to The Insurgents. Please remember to subscribe over at theinsurgents.substack.com. Find the podcast on all your favorite podcast apps. And please remember to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It's very helpful and we appreciate it a lot. But please, again, don't mention Ken Klippenstein in the review. He is banned from the show. It's a lifetime ban. So please do not mention him in the review. And we'll be back later this week with more of the content that you know and love. Goodbye.